The summit in Busan was a carefully orchestrated illusion. President Trump, fresh from Air Force One, beamed like a game show winner. He clapped Xi Jinping on the back, a gesture that reeked of forced camaraderie. The cameras flashed, capturing the moment for posterity, the triumphant return of American soybeans to the Chinese market. Xi Jinping again saw his sing to the top to urge Chinese importers boost their prices even after 80%. But Xi ain't coming to inquire. Trump had flown halfway around the world, held the global economy hostage, and emerged seemingly victorious. He'd strong-armed China into buying American soybeans again, a win for the farmers in Iowa, a win for his base, or so he thought. But behind the smiles, behind the carefully worded press releases, a different battle was raging. A battle not of cargo ships and tariffs, but of algorithms and microchips. While Trump was busy securing his soybean trophy, China was quietly executing a masterstroke, a move that would reverberate through Silicon Valley and reshape the future of artificial intelligence. The story begins, as so many do these days, with a ban. An American ban intended to cripple China's burgeoning AI industry. The logic was simple, if brutally effective. Prevent U.S. companies like Nvidia from selling their most advanced AI chips, the A100S and H100S, to China. Deny them the tools and you deny them the future. It was a policy born of paranoia, a desire to maintain America's technological dominance, a fear of a rising China. Nvidia, however, is a corporation, not a patriot. They saw a market, a vast and lucrative market, and they weren't about to let a little thing like national security stand in their way. So they did what corporations do. They found a loophole. They poured millions into designing weaker, less powerful versions of their chips that were perfectly legal under U.S. export controls. The B40 was born. It was a compromise, a way to appease Washington while still feeding China's insatiable appetite for AI. It seemed like a win-win. America could still sell its tech, Nvidia could still rake in the profits, and China's military wouldn't get its hands on the best stuff. But China had other plans. In September of 2025, just weeks before the Busan summit, the Cyberspace Administration of China, the CAC, dropped a bombshell, a quiet directive almost unnoticed by the Western press, but devastating in its implications. They blacklisted the B40. They told their tech giants, Alibaba, ByteDance, all of them, to stop buying these perfectly legal American chips. This wasn't just compliance, it was defiance. It was Beijing looking Washington in the eye and saying, "We don't need your second-rate technology, we'll build our own." It was proactive decoupling, a deliberate severing of ties, a declaration of technological independence. The impact on Nvidia was immediate and brutal. Their CEO, in a rare moment of candor, lamented that their Chinese market share had collapsed from 95% to near zero. A market they had dominated, a market they had fought to retain, vanished overnight. But the consequences went far beyond Nvidia's bottom line. This American policy, intended to kneecap China's AI ambitions, had become the single greatest gift Washington could have ever given to Nvidia's Chinese competitors, companies like Huawei. The United States government had just gifted a protective, multi-billion-dollar captive market to its chief rival. For years, Trump had been preaching America First protectionism, but it was China who was taking notes, who understood the assignment. Trump saw a trade deficit, soybeans, steel, washing machines. He was playing checkers, moving physical goods around a board. China saw the same board, but understood the real prize wasn't the harvest, it was the data, the chip. They were willing to sacrifice a few pawns, those $25 0 cents per ton losses on soybeans, to achieve a long-term strategic checkmate in technology. The Trump administration, in its obsession with 20th century manufacturing numbers, completely missed the 21st century power dynamic. His own policies accelerated the very outcome he claimed to be fighting, a technologically independent China that no longer needs or wants American innovation. He had successfully taught Beijing that any reliance on America was not just a risk, but a critical existential vulnerability. So, as Air Force One headed home from that whirlwind Asia tour, what was really in the cargo hold? Trump was bringing home his great victory, a story he could tell the farmers in Iowa and Ohio. He got another vague promise on fentanyl, and as we saw in the Korean press, he even got a literal gold crown in metal from the president of South Korea. A trinket, a bauble, a symbol of a hollow victory. Xi Jinping, on the other hand, kept something far more valuable. He kept a domestic tech industry that was now supercharged, fueled by a captive market legally shielded from its #1 American competitor by American policy. He kept a clear, unobstructed path toward technological independence. Trump may have just saved the harvest in the Midwest, but in the process, he may have permanently lost the future of Silicon Valley. The article on Xi Jinping's economic thought that followed the summit struck an assertive tone, framing the trade tensions as among the tough battles China must endure to make its economy stronger. It claimed the U.S. overestimated its leverage while underestimating China's capacity for counteraction and its strategic composure. China, it declared, was living just fine without a deal with the United States. What was meant to be Washington's ultimate pressure tactic, massive tariffs, blacklists, and trade isolation, had turned into a training ground for Beijing. When the new 50% import rule landed in late September, the message from Washington was simple: force China back to the table. But in Beijing, the reaction was calm. Instead of panic, there was preparation. Officials talked about long battles and endurance, not surrender. By mid-October, Chinese state media no longer framed the trade war as a crisis, but as a path to strength. The idea that the world's second largest economy needed American approval to grow suddenly felt outdated. If tariffs were designed to break China, they instead revealed how much the global economy already depended on it. The real turning point wasn't tariffs or trade deals. It was the expansion of Washington's blacklist and the imposition of that 50% tariff rule on September 29th. Beijing struck back, not with angry speeches, but with moves that cut deep. Export controls on rare earth minerals, the very lifeblood of semiconductors and electric motors, sent tremors from Seoul to Berlin. Soybean imports from the United States were halted for over 6 weeks, with new orders rerouted to Brazil and Argentina. Each action was a calculated jab targeting sectors where the United States was most vulnerable: technology, agriculture, and the global supply of critical inputs. Even the G7 finance ministers were forced to address the growing disruption. Yet, Beijing insisted these were not acts of aggression but necessary countermeasures, a mere recalibration of the global order. What followed was a strategic inversion. The country that was supposed to crumble under pressure was now wielding that same pressure to strengthen its negotiating hand. Instead of rushing to make amends, Beijing waited for Washington to blink. The message was crystal clear: China doesn't need a deal to survive. Beneath the surface, China's resilience stemmed from 3 key advantages. First, its domestic market had become the primary engine of growth. The dual circulation strategy, launched after 2020, prioritized household consumption and domestic manufacturing, accounting for the bulk of GDP growth. Retail sales soared through 2025, fueled by unprecedented infrastructure spending and a relentless pursuit of self-sufficiency in energy and food. Second, China had diversified its export network. While exports to the United States plummeted by roughly 27% in September, total exports surged by over 8% thanks to booming sales to ASEAN, Europe, and Latin America. Countless mid-sized exporters in electronics and machinery had cleverly shifted production or logistics to Southeast Asia while maintaining ownership and supply links within China, effectively transforming the region into an extended workshop under Chinese control. Third, Beijing's iron grip on financial policy provided ample room to maneuver. With over $3 trillion, 0 cents in foreign exchange reserves, and tight control of its banking system, China could easily absorb external shocks with state credit, manipulate the yuan's value to boost exports, and shield vital sectors through targeted subsidies. The government treated the trade war not as an emergency, but as a long-term stress test, a chance to fine-tune its economic defenses. Meanwhile, the ripple effects were wreaking havoc on Washington's own backyard. Farmers in the Midwest watched helplessly as Chinese orders vanished. Manufacturing costs skyrocketed as rare earth materials and imported components became scarce. The very tariffs that were supposed to revive American industry were now fueling domestic inflation and supply delays. 9 months into Trump's second term, the signature weapon of his economic arsenal had backfired spectacularly. Instead of isolating China, it had spurred the country to rebuild its economy around resilience and independence. Beijing's refusal to beg for a deal was no longer defiance, it was a carefully calculated strategy. Trump's advisors once believed leverage came from pressure. But China turned that logic on its head. By tightening its grip at home and extending its reach abroad, Beijing had transformed economic defense into geopolitical power. The trade war was no longer about tariffs, it was a contest of endurance. Washington waited for concessions that might never come, while Beijing adapted, expanded, and moved forward unburdened by the past. The irony was inescapable. The tariffs designed to break China had only made it stronger than ever. Because in 2025, the truth was undeniable. China was living just fine without a deal with the United States. And the longer this war dragged on, the more that reality would sink in Washington.